Hi, everyone. My name is Juliana Finnegan, and I work for the Learning Accelerator. We're a national nonprofit that believes every child has the right to a highly effective, engaging, and equitable education, one that supports them to meet their unique and full potential. As part of our work in response to COVID-19 and related school closures, our team has been developing a number of resources to support educators in remote learning. This is the second in a three-part series of presentations we created for school leaders across the country to understand how to drive quality and improvement in remote learning implementation. This section of the module series is focused on how to drive remote instruction quality and improvement through specific strategies and practices you can build into your remote learning experiences daily. We've made a recording for those who might want to have a little bit of voiceover with the slides themselves, or who may want a little bit of a direction as they prepare for delivering this series on their own. As I mentioned, this is free and open for anyone to use to help build their understanding and implementation of quality remote learning. Here are the session objectives. There are four main objectives throughout this piece. One, learning about key practices for remote instruction, which includes mastery-based learning, personalization, and collecting and using data meaningfully. Then identifying ways to align your school leadership team and your educators so that everyone is really on the same page. And then identifying specific resources and strategies to apply. And also this is built with the idea of modeling best practices around remote learning, which you'll notice in actually how it is structured. It will have an introduction with a warm up and welcome, then 20 minutes to dive deep into the content itself. Then those who are participating in the instruction will actually be able to explore specific areas that they're interested in or really resonate in the moment. And then after that exploration, there'll be a 20-minute small group so that they can discuss and share. And then we'll close out with a post-it promise and questions. This is really where you ask the participants to set action goals for either tomorrow, next week, or next month. So let's jump in. First, there's a recap from session A, really just going through the whole framework itself and seeing that there's two main parts. One, the foundation for self-directed learning that then enable effective instruction to happen. Then it goes into the specific instructional practices within these pieces. So thinking through connection, personalization around relationship factors within pedagogy, rigorous content, active learning, mastery-based learning, and then technology factors. How are you ensuring that it's both accessible, easy to use, that you're matching your mode to your actual objective at hand, and that it's organized in a clear way that allows students to be able to really use their cognitive load on learning the content as opposed to trying to figure out the technology at hand. So now we're going to jump in really to that instruction piece. Within remote design, teachers make choices about how to use and blend different modalities during their instruction. We really think about the main modalities as mentioned in session A of synchronous, asynchronous, digital, and analog. And as you saw earlier, this graph kind of shows like what are different practices that live within each of these zones and how can you use them in a mixed way so that you're building an engaging experience for students within the remote space and not trying to just duplicate what you'd be doing in person. Today, we're actually going to explore specific powerful instructional practices and go deeper into how do you actually use those modalities to build an engaging experience for all of your students in the remote space. So first, if we're looking at overall design for remote instruction, there's the relationship factors, pedagogy, and technology. Now, when blended together, like we said, really matching that mode to the objective at hand. So like when are you using asynchronous, when are you using synchronous, when are you using digital and analog, and really blending those together in an effective way allows you to use real-time data to personalize for students by building in opportunities for choice and agency, and also really building in a mastery-based progression to enable students to go at their own pace and really master different content in different ways and also spiral back to that content. So one more thing I want to explore before we go into the practices. You also want to make sure that you're really aligning with either your teacher team or your leadership team to build coherence, engagement, and really make meaningful decisions together. So thinking through alignment, how is your team all working together to fully understand what your vision is? What are the guardrails? What are your expectations for remote learning? And then also building buy-in. So how do you actually include ideas and insights and feedback and support and multiple iterations onto your design so that you can really make sure that it resonates and works for all of the different stakeholders who are having to implement in different ways. And then also, how are you collaborating and building capacity for both yourself as a leader, but also building teacher leaders and fostering teacher teams to help them work together and leverage each other's expertise to say like, hey, I'm really strong here, but this is an area that I really need to grow on. And then having somebody else saying like, I'm actually really strong there, but I need to grow here. And how do you actually share those practices within the remote space and building in strategies and opportunities for that to happen in meaningful ways? So designing instruction that matches the mode to the objective. Now this was hit on a little bit in session A, but I really want to go a little deeper here. So thinking through like, when you're introducing a topic, for instance, what are different ways that you can actually do that? You can do synchronous direct instruction, really doing a really big kickoff of a new content and saying like, let's just talk it through. You could have an asynchronous playlist for students to go through and learn the basics of that content through videos, readings, different ways to apply it. Or you could actually have like a choice board that again could be asynchronous and allow students to say, okay, so I know I want to learn this new concept. How can I learn it? I can learn it by going through these different videos, readings. I can make a vocab foldable. I could also go through an interactive lab. All different ways to actually engage with the content through inquiry is really great because it allows students to both have choice and agency around what they're learning and then also feel engaged and bought into the experience. Now, that's one example of an objective, is introducing a new topic, and you can do it in a multitude of ways using these different modalities. But you can also think about what's another type of objective is going deeper or clarifying misconceptions. You could do that synchronously through a virtual Socratic seminar. Or you could also do small group breakouts so that each small group is actually working on a specific area of growth and working with each other in that like peer learning. So these are different ways of thinking around like, not only what is my modality that I want to use, but how does it match what my objective is for where we're at in the content or what we want students to master. And again, sorry, going deeper, you could have an asynchronous choice board to illustrate mastery and application as well. So now let's jump into those powerful instructional practices. The first one is real-time data use. When we're thinking of real-time data use, we can think through assessment, data analysis, monitoring and sharing that. But how does this look differently within the remote space? But some things may actually look very similarly. As a leader, there's some specific considerations of implementation of remote data use. So one, setting a vision for data use and why. So really sharing with your educators in your school, like what are key metrics and data they should be collecting and how often. Be really clear on the why. What data are you taking and why are you getting it? So are you trying to learn about your students, understand their mastery of different content, be able to figure out prior knowledge, be able to group students. So really talking with your educators and saying, okay, these are some of the metrics we need to collect school-wide. This is why, and this is how it's going to influence your practice. And then also build out structures to get it done. So define like expected manageable frequency for that collection. Where are they going to put it? How are they going to organize it? Are students going to be able to engage with it? Will you be able to share it with other teachers? Define the teachers' roles, the teams, and students will play respectively in that collection. This is really a fun way to actually also engage students in the data themselves. So maybe there's some data that they're able to actually collect and then share with the educator. And there's some other things that the teacher is collecting on the other side. And then actually matching and walking through and triangulating that data to really understand the whole student. And then also determine supports. Will you have leaders, coaches? Will you have data teacher teams? How are you going to actually build structures and support for educators to do this well? Here are some examples of remote data use practices in action. As you can see, again, we put these in these 4 buckets, well, actually 3 buckets, around some synchronous and digital opportunities, or digital and asynchronous, or analog and asynchronous. Take some time just to read over those. also thinking through what are some examples in action. So for each of these, we're actually going to be sharing with you just one way to do it using technology, and then one way that's more of like an in-person instructional practice that you can kind of move to the remote space. So this one is use a web platform to do a quick CFU, something like Nearpod. It's fun, it's interactive, it's free. There's also a fun way to collect data on students is through learner profiles. Here's two different examples from two different schools we've showcased. Lovett Elementary and Locust Grove. Learner profiles enable educators to collect a multitude of data about students from their interests, the way they learn best, what's happening at home, and really like how you can build an experience for them that's going to be both engaging, equitable, and effective. Practice 2, personalization. So we first started talking about you're collecting your data. Now, how do you use that data to personalize for students? As a leader, it's really important to showcase the progression across these powerful practices to think through, first we're collecting data that then informs our personalization, and then we can kind of move to mastery. So big things here, differentiation, student choice, and agency. So how are you differentiating for students, and how are you also offering them opportunities to take ownership and make choices around their time, content, space, groupings, etc. Just like we had before, here's some remote personalization practices in action around those key modalities of synchronous, asynchronous, digital, and analog. When looking at these, make sure you're thinking about which modality would help with which objective within a remote classroom setting. For example, differentiated playlists. That's enabling students to have the flexibility around when they work on a playlist, and also what different supports they get within that playlist based on their needs. Here's a fun platform, Flipgrid, that offers alternative ways to illustrate mastery, engage in peer reviews, and post virtual presentations. This is really a fun way to actually give a personalized twist to the content, and also enable students to have choices around how they show their mastery. Here's another practice in action, self-paced progress through playlists. If you actually click on this graphic, it will bring you to the strategy itself and give you some more framing and actually some artifacts about how to actually put it into action. Playlists really enable agency and choice because they allow students to think through how do they learn best, what content do they need to master the full content as a whole, and really take ownership of that learning experience. Practice 3, mastery-based learning. So really when you're thinking about how you're going to bring mastery-based learning into the remote environment, think about what are your learning objectives, assessments of mastery, how are you going to assess students? And as a leader, are you ensuring that educators are aligned with what the definition of mastery is, and what are learning pathways, and how do you actually report those? Considerations for implementing remote mastery-based learning. Big thing here is, as a leader, how are you working with your educators to do all of these different things? One, map out a progression of standards and learning objectives. This can be done grade-wise, it can be done by subject, but really trying to build collaborative environments where educators are not trying to do this on their own, but that they're actually building progression together. Define and build alignment around what mastery looks like. That's gonna be really helpful to say, so is it a rubric? Is it showing different examples of like, this is what mastery looks like within this context or within this type of an assignment? Will this be consistent across grade levels, subjects, schools? And then also building in opportunities for spiraling. As we know, most students, educators, anyone doesn't learn something the first time they do it. So how are you building in opportunities for spiraling and allowing students multiple tries at mastery content, or maybe multiple tries at showing their mastery in different ways? And are these going to be classroom-based, or are they going to be consistent across your school? Also offering multiple pathways based on mastery. So how are you giving students the ability and the flexibility to work at their own pace? Also, are there opportunities to bring in multi-age options? Within the remote space, this is even easier because you're not moving from classroom to classroom, but could you offer up a multi-age small group to really work on something that all of those students need support in without thinking of them as in separate grades? Again, back to the modalities. So thinking through asynchronous, synchronous, digital, and analog. Here are some different practices in action around mastery-based learning. Another example in action is using Google Sheets like this one to track mastery of standards. This helps you to have like a transparent look into what things students have mastered and what things they're still working on. And they're able to also interact with this and understand what areas they need to work on and really put their focus on. This can also be a great way to bring in caregivers and ensure that everyone is on the same page and everyone's working towards the same goal. Another one is demonstrating mastery with 2 challenges and a capstone. This is from Bronx Arena in New York City. The big goal here is to create a rigorous alignment and flexibility in how you show mastery. So not only where have you mastered content, but now how can you show mastery in different ways that make sense with each learner. Now, this is the point in the session where you actually allow each learner or each participant to do their own independent learning time. So if you click on this, it will bring you to a personalized resource guide. You will find session B, driving remote instruction, and you will see instructional planning as a team, data-driven instruction, personalization, and mastery-based learning. So what you'll have each participant do is identify their challenge and then explore the different resources based on what area they really want to work on. Then you will have everybody really reflect, assess, and explore, like you saw on the resource guide, and explore a playlist of resources focused on one of the topics that really resonates or they really need additional resources around. After the independent exploration, which honestly can take as long or as little as you need, then you can break out into small group exploration where everyone gets to share a resource they found interesting, an aha or a question they still have. This is really another way to build collaboration and sharing and alignment. If you're doing this with a teacher team or you're doing this with your educators, but also if you're doing it by yourself, it could be a fun way to actually loop in a colleague or friend to say like, hey, I just got some of these resources, I'd love to share them with you and love to get your feedback as well. Then at this point in the session, we actually have 10 different volunteers to share. And again, this is really allowing the jigsaw mentality to kind of learn from each other and learn from the group. This was held with groups from 100 all the way to almost 1,000 people. So it is possible to do it with very small groups and also very large groups. This is the part where we do post-it promises. It's a really fun way to say like, hey, I promise to do this next week, next month, etc. You can put that post-it on your laptop to remind you to do that thing. You can also have participants, if you're doing this remote, to put it in the chat and say, this is what I promise. This also holds each other accountable to different specific actions. Just wanted to also share another free resource for your work. If you're looking for specific guidance and support around one challenge, one focus area, you can actually apply for our Always Ready for Learning response support. It's pro bono coaching for K-12 leaders. So you can be a school, you can be a system, you put in your question, you put in your challenge, and you're actually matched with a consultant that can help you with that challenge right away. And then once that's answered, you can actually spiral back and come back with another question and be matched with another person for coaching support. So it's a really great way to get free support fast and really answer some of those questions right away. At the end of this is just an appendix if you want to learn more about the Learning Accelerator. Also, additional free resources. Here you can find strategies from 12 different schools across the US. And here's a one thing remote series for educators and leaders where you can actually see specific challenges that different educators were facing throughout this time. And we built actionable resources to match those challenges. Hope you enjoyed and have a great day.